So I think it was about a week later that Tom was released for post-mortem. Obviously, there would have been, other bodies, before him, other people who had passed away before him, who would have to be in a queue. So his post-mortem was done. It had revealed that Tom had died of a heart attack due to a brain injury, and he was just too weak to survive. So that was on the death certificate. Andy had got a copy of that. Tom's body, 2 days later, Tom's body was released. It was a Sunday. I think it was the 23rd of August 1993. Something like, I'm not too sure, I'd have to really remember the date to go back and look at that. His body was released and it was taken to Hialeah crematorium, which wasn't too far from where Andy was living. There was just me and Andy in attendance, and the people who ran the crematorium. I was spiritual, but I wasn't religious. I didn't have any words in me to say anything over Tom because I didn't know him. And so Tom was, I think, their version of a Presbyterian or something like that. And so they brought in a reverend and they said a few words, over Tom. Spoke about his medical, his military background, the medals that he'd, got, in Vietnam, the quiet nature of him, his love of animals and life and people in general, and just spoke nice words over Tom that were very, very befitting for him. I could feel my stomach going nuts. I looked at Andy, I put my hand on Andy's shoulder and on his arm, and Andy just started sobbing. It's very tough to see a grown man like Andy cry, having been through the life that he had and through Vietnam and had survived his 3 tours or something, or his 4 tours in Vietnam or whatever, because Andy had volunteered to do a couple. It's very tough seeing that. Andy's life was now empty of a very solid, long friendship, and there was nothing in Andy's life that was going to change that or bring that back or replace it. You know what I mean? And Andy was going to suffer mentally and emotionally of that. Andy was like Tom's brother. Tom was like Andy's brother. Andy had made a commitment to take care of Tom and to make sure that he was comfortable. And because it happened in Andy's plane, and Andy never forgave himself for it. Never once forgave himself for that, and always told me, that he couldn't forgive himself for doing that. And Andy suffered that more now, knowing that that Tom had fallen again in Andy's house and bashed his head, and that had now been the cause of his death. So it was going to be a tough ride for Andy for a while. So the service was short. The service was about 15 or 20 minutes. Tom wouldn't have wanted anything long-winded. Me and Andy didn't want anything long-winded for him. I didn't know Tom very well. Andy wrote a few words for the Reverend to say on him, because obviously Andy knew him, and it was said very, very emotionally and very passionately for Tom. And then the casket was then pushed into the oven, basically, and the door was closed. The guy hit a green button, the gas went up hotter, and we left. We went out into the waiting room. They brought us a cup of coffee each, which we didn't really drink. We went outside, and we just stood there in silence. And then about an hour later, the Reverend came out with a small urn, like a marble urn with Tom's ashes in it, and Andy couldn't take it. Andy, he said it to Andy, and Andy just couldn't lift his arms. He said his arms felt like lead. So I took the urn and put my hand on Andy's shoulder, and I said, "Come on, mate, let's go home." And so we went home. I asked Andy where he wanted me to put the ashes, and he just says, "Could you put them on Tom's dressing table?" And he'd, get to it and figure it out at some point. And I said, "Yeah, it's the little cat." So the little kitty was now going to miss Tom. And so I says to Andy, "What do you want to do about the cat?" And Andy says to me, "Would you keep it?" And I said, "Yeah, okay." Now, first of all, Andy says, "Should we give it to a shelter?" And I says, "No." And I just says, "How long has Tom had it?" And he goes, "Since it was a tiny kitten." And I think the cat was about a year old. And I says, "No." I says, I'll take it." I said, "I'll keep it." So the kitty was very easy, and the kitty was called Kitty. That's what Tom had called her. So the kitty was very easy to handle. She knew something was wrong. She knew that something was wrong. I think she knew that Tom wasn't going to come back, because Tom was all she knew. So I picked her up, wrapped in a little towel, and I took her downstairs with the little pillow that Tom had. I took her downstairs to my room and I put her on the bed, and she just immediately climbed up onto the pillow, and she just lay there. She knew something was wrong. So I wrapped a little towel around her, and I just left her for, I think, about an hour on her own. Andy stayed up in his room. I went out and got a coffee. I went back in. I got on the bed. I climbed up behind her, and I pulled the pillow up, and I lay on my pillow, and she cuddled into me. She put her little head under my chin, curled up and put her head under my chin, and she pushed herself in as far as she could go, like she wanted to disappear. So my heart was in. My stomach was a giant knot, and I just remember lying there and just with my hand on her, and she just pushed in as far, like she just wanted to get into the smallest bowl she could and disappear. So very sad times. So I just lay there. It started to rain. The rain started to bounce on the deck and onto the window of the doors, and she was used to that, and she little ears pricked up when she heard that, and she sat up and she just sat watching the rain. She obviously did that in Tom's room, when the rain hit his window, because his room was above mine, and so she sat up, and I sat up on the bed, and then I put the little pillow on my lap, and she just sat there, and I was kind of just, scratching her ears and stuff like that there, and I tried to bond with her as quickly as possible, and she knew there was something wrong. So I spent all that day and night with her. She didn't eat, she didn't drink, she started to meow, she started to cry. I wanted to take her back upstairs and let her see Tom's room again, but something told me not to do that. I kept her downstairs, and for 2 or 3 days she never ate, she didn't pee, she didn't poop, she cried. She would push herself into me as much as she could, and she would just cry, she would just meow and cry, and she was definitely missing Tom. And I just would cuddle up to her. When I ate, I would try and give her little bits of something, and she just wasn't interested. And I thought she was just going to die of starvation, basically. I think then it was the third evening or the fourth day. She sat up and she's tried to paw my face with a little paw, and I thought, I'm going to try you with something now. So I took her off the pillow, I put her on the bed, I got off the bed and tapped my leg to see if she'd come, and she jumped off the bed and she followed me out into the kitchen. Her little tail was up in the air. She followed me into the kitchen. I got a little bowl of milk and a little plate of tuna fish, and I put it down, and she attacked it. she went to town on the tuna fish, and she drank the milk, and she kind of came over to me and stood by my leg, and I tapped my foot, and she crawled. She crawled up my leg. She basically clawed away up my leg, up my back. Nails were digging into me. And she came and she sat on my shoulder. So she was on my shoulder over the back, and she sat there and she put her head into my face and stuff. And I just thought, she's bonded. And she sat there, and I walked out. I grabbed a cup of coffee. I walked out with her sitting on my shoulder. I went and I sat down on the TV, and she sat on my shoulder, half on the couch, and with her head over my shoulder. And she started purring, and and that was a good sign. And she fell asleep. She fell asleep on my shoulder. I felt like a fucking pirate with a parrot on my shoulder. But she purred, and she fell asleep, and I just left her there, and she slept for about an hour, and then the phone rang, and it was Dave. And I gave Dave a quick rundown on what had happened, told him that Tom had passed, that he'd been cremated, and Dave was gutted. He sounded absolutely gutted. I told him about the little cat, about Kitty, and Dave says, "What what's?" I said, "I'm keeping her." Dave was, "Oh, fucking good skills, Carl. Fucking well done, mate. Fucking good job." All this type of stuff. Dave loved animals as well. And he goes, "No, fucking alcohol. No, don't be giving her up. Don't fucking put her in one of them little fucking cat orphanages, and then she'll be taken up by some fucking horrible bastard, and you fucking probably beat her to death." All this type of stuff. So I said that wasn't going to happen.